What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, the podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it.
Joining me today is Per. Per, why don't you just jump right into it and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it was really nice to be able to be on your podcast, by the way. It's awesome. It's really nice to be able to share my story and hopefully be an impact in some people's lives to be able to help them. And that's why I wanted to share my story. So, I was married for 20 years and as you hear from my accent, it's not West Texas. It's actually a Swedish accent. I usually joke about that, but I grew up in Sweden in a very loving family. My mom and dad stayed married. They definitely had struggles in their marriage, but the last part of their marriage was awesome. So I grew up in a very loving family. I got married when I was 27, I think it was. Met an American in Los Angeles, all places, and fell in love, and had a fairly good marriage, I think, for probably the first 60-70%, like the first 12 years. But then it started going downwards with many things. Both kids, my two youngest daughters, had an illness, and a lot of fear, and a lot of focus, especially from my wife's side, to the kids, neglecting me. I felt very neglected, and I can understand part of that, but it became more and more so. It was, and we have 4 kids. They're 25, 23, 18, and 16. And I also had to deal with a lot of alienation after the divorce. So the divorce was initiated by my wife 6 years ago, and with a lot of not true things in the divorce decree or in the filing. And it brought a lot of fear into the whole divorce itself by initiating with lies in the divorce filing. And that's still to this day, there are a lot of strife in our relationship. We only communicate via mail currently. And it's still... I have always been quick to forgive, and my ex have had a really hard time to kind of like go past the stuff. It's kind of like becoming a big snowball for her, and I think she has a lot of anger, and that's why she's used the kids against me. And it went initially, even while we were in court, she's texting my son and telling him that I'm lying and I'm trying to screw her over. And then he didn't talk to me for 8 months after the divorce. Now I have a very good relationship to all kids. But it's taken me a long time, a lot of patience, a lot of just connecting, trying to stay connected, even though a large part of this period I had to travel back and forth to Sweden and being away for months, sometimes a month at a time. And same thing with my girls 2.5 years ago. My ex just started talking to my girls and saying that I wasn't fulfilling, I wasn't paying child support, I wasn't doing this and this. And it's not true. I've never missed a child support payment. And they stopped talking to me for like 6 months. So yeah, it's been a very up and down journey, but right now I've never felt better in my whole life. It's like I work as a financial advisor, but I also coach people through divorce, and using that both as a coaching, also mentoring, because I have all this experience. I really want to help people, and I do that part-time. And I really love doing that. That's to be able to give back. And it's also part of the healing process to be able to give back in helping others.
Yeah,
it's very powerful.
So let's hone in on alienation a little bit, because it's something that I don't think I've specifically dealt with. But in what ways did she, I mean, you sort of described some of it, but in what ways did she try and alienate, or did she alienate?
Speaking poorly about me, lying about me, mainly. That's my oldest son, was probably the one that's been closest to her. And she's using him as a tool to be able to manipulate and getting more out of me in the divorce process. Also with the girls is mainly to try to get her way, I think, to be able to manipulate and using the kids to be able to, as a leverage, to be able to get more money, getting other things, etc. And if she doesn't get her way, she uses the kids.
Now, how do you? How has your lawyer recommended you combat that type of stuff?
I asked initially if I should go to court. First I asked my counselor. I asked my lawyer, and the thing is, the sad thing with lawyers is that a lot of times they like to bill extra. And so he was all for to go into court, and he said it, most of my money I don't make on the initial divorce. It's after to make adjustments on the divorce decree, which is sad. I totally... This legal system, I have a lot of comments about as well, but I know a lot of people have that as well. So, but my counselor said, yeah, you can go to court, you can drive this, but your relationship to your kids will most likely not improve, even if you force them to come over to your place, etc. So she actually recommended me to just be patient and reconnect in different ways, because we had joint custody. It wasn't that I wanted more legal time, but I wanted the time I was supposed to be able to get. And the kids also were at the age where in Texas, you can, the kids can choose themselves if you're over a certain age, like 14 years old. If you have a court hearing, they're going to have to ask the child, do you want to spend more time with your dad or mom, etc. And I didn't want to drag them into court, etc.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was the right thing. If the kids would have been a lot younger, then it would probably been a different story.
So was there any recommendations for like document, or in case you did want to eventually go to court? Like, was there any of that kind of advice?
I asked my lawyer, and he's definitely said document everything that happens, and I did, especially initially. I don't do it anymore.
Right.
So
what about I think you start to mention a counselor. Was there counselors involved for your children? Were they in therapy?
Yeah, we did. And that was one of the best things we did in the divorce, is that we actually wrote in the name of the counselor as well in the divorce decree, and agreed on how much counseling. I think it's very good to be able to put that in writing, so you have that an agreement. So they went through counseling for 2 years. My youngest 2 daughters. My boys, my oldest went just sporadically, and my second oldest, he only went one time, and he didn't want to go, but he was over 18, so he could choose himself. But my daughters, they definitely went to counseling, and me and my ex-wife went with as well at every other time. And we didn't sit in, but then afterwards we gathered together and talked, and they could ask questions and etc. So that was absolutely fabulous. That was really, really good.
So when you said 20 years? So when did it all sort of start to go wrong? Like, or when did you notice this was going to start? Was there things that were red flags that eventually, like, that you saw initially that you sort of ignored, that started coming up that you could no longer ignore, or like what led to the end of it? Yeah,
I noticed our disagreements started. That was probably like after 12, 13 years, but it was maybe 5 years before the actual divorce that we started having a lot of arguments. And my ex-wife, she went through. She had her own company. A lot of things on our plate. We were so busy all the time. We didn't have enough time for each other. The kids took up a lot of time, and I think that's a big part of why it was falling apart. We didn't prioritize a marriage. I was too busy with work, definitely. So it's I would truly believe it's both our doing into our divorce going south. And it was almost like I wasn't completely aware. It sounds weird, but it feels like it was so busy with everything. You're driving kids everywhere. You have all these doctor's appointments. You have to make money, and it was just going too fast. We would have to need to slow down. And I started realizing that, and we got a counselor. Initially, it was my wife that wanted a counselor, and I said, no, I don't want a counselor. I thought we can figure this out ourselves. And this is probably like 4 years before the divorce.
Right.
And then after 6 months, probably, I said, okay, let's go to a counselor. And then after 2 sessions, she didn't want to go. Okay. And then we went to another counselor 2 times, and she was running out of there frustrated and angry whenever he asked her questions. And then we did a third counselor, and same thing there. So it was difficult. And the unraveling was, my wife had an affair, and then I found out and questioned her about it, and it's been going on for like almost a year. And then actually she filed for divorce. I still wanted to work it out because it was over. It was done, but she wanted to end it, and that was it.
So looking back, what are some of the lessons that you've learned, things that you'll apply should there be a next relationship?
Yeah, I've actually, I've been dating now for 5 months.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's, I definitely think if you've been married or in a relationship a long term, I think you need to take a pause after a relationship before you start dating again. I started dating pretty much right after the divorce decree was signed. And it was only out of loneliness. I was so lonely, because of the alienation, and also that we just had moved here. I didn't have any friends here. I was extremely lonely, depressed, and I just wanted to have a friend out there. It's like, so I started dating for a year, and then I just started realizing after 2-3 month short relationships, or whatever you want to call it, that I'm not ready to date. I'm dating for the wrong reason. And so I actually took 2 years off dating, over 2 years. Nice. I just starting to rediscover me. What do I like to do? And so the biggest learnings is really to do the self-care. It's a kind of like I think I don't know if it's the right word to use, but it's like starting to figure out, what do you love to do? So I started playing golf again. I played a lot of golf when I was younger, and a lot of tennis. So I picked up golf. I picked up tennis. Got a bunch of friends playing tennis and golf. My best friends now. And that's actually how I met my girlfriend on the tennis court. They had the mixed doubles. Oh, nice. And that was so organic. I wasn't even dating. And she was just there, and she was, wow, I have to ask her out. So I asked her out, and nice. So that was very nice. And I talk about that. I have a podcast myself called Rocking Life After Divorce. And there I actually, on the podcast, share about dating apps. I think dating apps can be good in some areas, but I think organic dating is where, or some people call it dating in the wild, where you start to engage outside, for example, and that breaks a lot of the loneliness too. When you get out among other people, I think it's so easy to go down a vicious spiral in divorce and just kind of like become lonely, depressed, suicidal thoughts, etc. But you really need to break out of that and get help. I got a coach and a mentor also very early on. And that was absolutely the most critical thing to do, because a lot of times you have blind spots. You don't see the whole picture, especially when it's a lot of fear. To be able to have somebody to call, what would you do, or what do you think? To have somebody to kind of like talk to, and reach out to a few friends too. I reached out, and that was actually my counselor that said, because I was so lonely. And then my counselor said, reach out to a few friends you trust and share what you're going through, share the hurts that you're going through. And it was 4 people. One of them was my brother, but it was actually the 2 people that had gone through divorce themselves that could hear me. They could understand. I could talk to them, and they could relate. My brother, he's awesome. He listened, but I never felt, because he has a great marriage, but I never felt that he could really understand me.
Yeah. I think that's pretty critical part of the recovery of getting back to a sense of normalcy is finding someone you can talk to about it, get it out, but also someone that can reflect back and say, yes, that happened to me too, or or at least there's enough similarities that it allows you to feel like you're not alone, certainly. But it also aids in, I think, in my MC, the trauma expert guest, said as much. It's important to express these things and get them out. You can't keep them inside, and it's easier with people that can relate. So it validates your feelings. So I think it's an incredibly important part of the process. So when everything kind of went down, how were you emotionally? What were you thinking and feeling once the bomb was dropped, so to speak?
I think for me it was very difficult because I didn't want the divorce.
Sure.
And even though there was infidelity, I was willing to work through that. I think men has a harder time with emotions. Maybe not, it's like a lot of times men is supposed to be the tough guy, supposed to be able to go through, and you don't talk about feelings, etc. And that was pretty much me, not wanting to talk about feelings. Didn't feel that I was comfortable talking about feelings. And that's probably one of the biggest learnings going through divorce, that I was forced to start dealing with feelings about hurts and really to kind of like dig in. And that was part of it was definitely my counselor, but also having these friends to be able to share, because they also had difficulties. And I could say, okay, I could help them. So it was not only that they were helping me, but I was able to help them. So it became like a dialogue. Right. And two of them are my absolutely best friends today. We still talk about anything. When we go through stuff, we can just call up and we talk several times a week. I was out playing golf with my best friend here just a couple of days ago this weekend. Nice. And to have that buddy that I've never had those type of friends before, where you can share your heart, you can just say, share your hurts, and you can talk about things, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, agreed. So did you go through any stages of intense anger towards your ex?
Initially, it was more reaction. I'm a very peaceful person. I don't want strife. I don't want. I know it doesn't lead anywhere to just start throwing stuff. Right. I'm not a violent person. I'm fairly logical, but I was definitely initially dealing with a lot of fear because my ex filed a very hostile divorce. Sure. And then I filed a counter offer for full custody of my kids, because my lawyer said, if you don't file a full custody and you don't get your green card, you're never going to see your kids again, which was true if I didn't get a green card. But a lot of times lawyers, they paint out this terrible picture, and that puts you into fear mode. And then I filed for full custody, and that was the worst things I've ever done. Because I put so much fear into my ex's side, and then she reacts to that with a bunch more. So it just falls, and then after 3 weeks, my lawyer actually called my wife a whore in court.
Whoa.
And I fired him the next day.
I was going to say.
Yeah, that was just so wrong, just escalating. But he is a winning part in this, because he can make it look really bad, get all these arguments, and make a bunch of money out of it.
Right. So, I mean, is there anything, it sounds like that for sure. Is there anything else that you would do differently in the process?
Definitely get a coach or a mentor, a counselor initially, even earlier on. I didn't get a coach and mentor until about 6 months after the divorce, and then a lot of the damage was already done. The counselor, we got on fairly quickly, but that was initially more a counselor for the kids, not for me. It became a counselor for me. I wish she would have been part early on. That's probably the biggest learning, to have somebody, because to have all these blind spots, everybody has blind spots. And to be able to have a third neutral party that can help you through this process, I think is crucial.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think, finding someone that can help you get back to, or even build back better than you previously were, I think can be an important step. I mean, whether that's a counselor or friend, someone that can not only listen to your stress and your the shit you're dealing with, for lack of a better description, someone to help you see that there's light on the other side, that there is life after divorce. There is. And, that's one of the central reasons I started the podcast and the support group is that, because it does get better. It does. Now you got to put some work in. It doesn't magically happen. You can make it magically happen by fooling yourself, by jumping right into dating and then finding someone and repeating that same cycle. But if you do the work, and whatever that means to you, for me, it's at least a part of it is just sitting with your shitty feelings and processing them and learning how to handle them and being more emotionally resilient. And if you do that kind of work, I think you start improving your own self in a lot of ways, because it's hard work. It's really hard work. And then I think once you do that, I think that you're going to attract a better quality mate or potential mates. So
absolutely,
it's not just the work that you do is beneficial for you in terms of your own health. It's also better because you can find a better partner. And so I think doing the work is critical. And unfortunately, I don't think everyone does, but those that do, I've seen it. I feel it myself. I'm in a much better spot. Even 6 months ago or whatever, certainly from the beginning, a year and a half ago, I'm in a much better spot. And that's a testament to doing the work. What are there any things that you around your children that you would have done differently? Ways to communicate, or how often you communicated, or is there any kind of things there that you would have done differently?
Absolutely. First, I'm going to comment what you just said about emotional intelligence, I guess you would call it. It's emotional intelligence is probably one of the most important things to grow, and that's for any area. It doesn't matter if you've gone through divorce or any. And employees and employers nowadays, most of them look more at your emotional intelligence than intelligence, because you can form somebody that has high emotional intelligence, meaning that they can form them. And that's what employees wants to do. But that's also something that you can learn throughout life and improve. Intelligence, you can't improve. You got what you got. But emotional intelligence is something that you can grow. And that's probably the thing that I've grown the most throughout this divorce and became aware of emotions. And I had a lot of shame about the divorce. My parents were married the whole life. My church preached so much about staying married and felt like a big failure, so I stopped going to church. And it wasn't until I started sharing about the divorce with people that this shame dissipated. And it's an author called Brené Brown that shares, she's a shame researcher. And when I started sharing, it was actually on the airplanes flying back and forth to Sweden. I just decided 5 years ago, I'm going to talk to the other person next to me. So my goal was actually to learn to connect with people. Sure. And I started sharing my divorce story with people on the airplane. And by me doing that, this shame just dissipated. Yep. And that was so awesome to be able to not being ashamed. Sure. That was probably the most difficult thing.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think something I learned in the Alpha Code and something I've developed is shame doesn't survive sunlight.
Exactly.
When you get it out, it dies. It just does, and it's incredibly an important lesson, and a healthy thing to do, because shame is a bitch. I mean, it will have you thinking there's something wrong with you. Not that you did bad things, but there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And the more that you keep it in, the more that it allows you to spiral or force.
Exactly.
So yeah, getting it out is a key. It doesn't survive sunlight. It doesn't survive, openness and honesty. So agreed. Yeah, it's important.
And when you get the emotional intelligence up there, when you start working on you to really do that, it's like you say, you attract what you project.
Absolutely.
If you're a whole person, you're going to attract a whole person. If you're a broken person, you're going to attract a broken person. Yep. And if you want to have an awesome relationship, you have to do the inner work. And then you can start attracting people, and they will be drawn to you. And that is so important. One of the most important things that you can do through this divorce, because when you're in the middle of it, I felt like I was sitting in the ocean initially. First year in the divorce, I didn't have any reference. I was kind of like feeling I was sitting in a rowboat, rowing, and it was no progress. It was so hard. But then now, looking back 5 years later, I can see all the progress I made. And then if you have a coach or a mentor that can help you through that, be your, share all your progress, even though you might not be able to see it. That's a lot of power in that.
Right. No, agreed. Yeah, 100%. So, back to the kids, the situation. Is there anything there you would have done differently or changed, based on hindsight?
Yeah, I would definitely, but it comes back to me not filing the full custody. That's what made things spiral out of control. By having a counselor and a coach through the process, I think I did the best I could have done, because I took a lot of effort. I decided to fly back and forth to Sweden, even though it hurt me financially, because not only the airplane tickets, but I wasn't able to work when I was here. So I flew every other month for 5 years. Wow. I stayed at the Airbnb when I was in Texas every other month. And I bent over backwards to be able to have my relationship with kids, because that's the most important thing in my life.
Sure.
And to be able to spend time with them, to see them grow up, see all, because I didn't have a green card. I still don't have a green card. I've been fighting for that for 5 years. Wow. To be able to get that in place. I hopefully get it there next month. So, but I did a lot of good things. I feel, because I did, and the kids can see that. That's why I have an awesome relationship with them now. Right. Even though we had a very turbulent time during times. Yeah. For example, one thing, when I was traveling back and forth, when I was in Sweden, I started learning their games online. So we started playing video games. Because sometimes when you call a kid, if you have a distance to your children, sometimes you talk on the phone for 5-10 minutes, and then you don't have anything more to talk about.
Right.
And if you have something you're doing, for example, playing a video game, you get on Skype and you just hang out. You strategize on the video game, and I did that for a year and a half with the kids. And playing video games, and we were in like 4 different locations, because my boys were in college, my girls were staying with my mom or their mom, and I was in Sweden. But we connected at the same time, and we hung out on a regular basis, once or twice a week.
Yeah, interesting. That's interesting. I haven't thought about something like that. That's pretty brilliant. I'll have to put some more thought into that. Do it for my kids, because you're right. Yeah, you how was your day? It's okay. Like there's not. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, but because what can you say? Especially if we talk pretty much every day. So that can make bringing up finding topics difficult. So that's it's interesting.
And being creative, I think that's the key. For example, I've tried to figure out things what the kids like, and that's the key when you really try to connect. Connecting with your kids is a key. Not to just go out to a restaurant all the time, but to really understand what do your kids love to do. Right. And for example, and they're all different. My oldest son, he loves rock climbing. This is new since a little over a year ago. And then I started rock climbing, not because I like rock climbing, but I started to like it a little bit.
Sure.
But he likes it. Right. So, and now we all rock climb.
Nice.
Every week we go rock climbing, and we started yoga 2 weeks ago. My son went, let's do yoga. Okay, let's do yoga.
Awesome. Well, it's pretty clear you're a dedicated father, and that's an important part of this too. Is not losing sight of what's really important. And it can be difficult. And not to say that your own mental health isn't perhaps a bigger priority, because
It definitely is.
as they say, you put your oxygen mask on first, type of view. But it's it's hard to, or it's easy to lose sight that they're important in this as well, and it wasn't their choice, and all those things. And sometimes you have to make some small sacrifices, or maybe even large ones that you don't want to, but is for the benefit of them. And that's an excellent viewpoint, and a great reminder to try and remember that they're dealing with this too, and more than likely don't want it either. And I don't know if they have people, there's lots of divorce out there. So, a decent amount of my daughter's friends are have gone through it or are going through it or whatever. And so, but I don't know if kids really, I don't know if they talk about that too much. I don't think that they want to, it's sort of like, they don't want to, you don't want to really deal with it because it's hurtful and painful, and plus it's embarrassing and shame. And so I don't think kids have that same ability to, unless there's some sort of program or whatever, but there's no ability to really, sit down with a friend and just talk about how the divorce sucks. Like, I don't know if kids do that, younger kids, obviously when they get older, they probably would, but so I think it's important to, to talk with them too, and try and get their feelings. But get them in counseling. That's a huge recommendation for me is and find a good one. It's not always not all counselors are good, as not all lawyers, not all people. So make sure you do due diligence and vet a counselor, and make sure you touch base with your kids and make sure that they like that particular person. If they see them a few times, and try and get their feedback. But I think that's an incredibly important part as well. Well, the last question I typically ask people is, what advice would you give to men that have just been told, just been served, or just been asked to leave, or were just let, the wife left the house and moved out? They're just starting this process, and they are scared and alone and confused and hurt. What piece of advice would you give to those men?
Mainly, absolutely, to reach out for help. If it's to a few friends, if it's to a counselor, if it's somebody that you can talk to, because it's so easy to go down the vicious spiral of loneliness, depression, suicidal thoughts, etc. And get a support around you to not only to support you, but to have somebody that can kind of call you out on your bullshit and not to overreact. Sometimes it's easy to overreact and take some time. For example, if you get an email, I don't respond right away. I write the response. I don't send it for 24 hours later. I read it again, and then said, a lot of times I was just, I can't send that. And then, I never text. Text can be very difficult because it's instant, and you have you come all with all these feelings, etc. So I think to be slow to respond as well is important, but definitely the most important, get support around you. You're gonna need that in this journey, especially probably the first year or maybe 2 years. And I actually got a roommate for 1.5 years, and that was also with a guy that just went through a divorce. And that was also one of the best things I've done, because it broke a lot of that loneliness I had. Sure.
Yeah, agreed. And those are all excellent points. And I think, your story is important. It's a little bit different than mine in terms of alienation. I didn't really deal with that. So hopefully your story brings hope to men that are going through that similar type of situation. But just the fact that you survived and you're doing pretty well. You're starting a podcast, or you have a podcast, which I want to get to the, how to find that. I'm assuming you're everywhere, but we'll talk about that in a sec. You're an example of a success story, still probably, I think you would agree, still a work in progress, as we
absolutely
all are. but you've come out the other side. You dealt with a pretty severe situation, and here you are, thriving. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for telling your story. I think it's an important one. How do people find your podcast? What's the best way?
It's called Rocking Life After Divorce. It has a lot to do with that. I started rock climbing with my kids because rock climbing and life has a lot of similarities. You go through these easy paths during life, and you go through these very, very difficult paths in life. If you're going to go and climb Mount Everest, you're not going to climb up there by yourself the first time, and you're going to need a guide, somebody that's already done the journey. And same thing in divorce. It is going to be, can be the most difficult thing you've ever done in your life, and you're going to need that support around you. So that's what the podcast is about, to bring hope, having people's stories, to share the stories and have other people be able to listen into it. But it's definitely been, I myself, I've never felt better, but it's by doing the journey. And I think that the divorce can be this catalyst for anybody that's going through divorce to make it into something beautiful instead of this vicious downward spiral. Make it into something beautiful. It can be.
No, agreed. I think it takes a while to get to that mindset, but there is no better opportunity in your life to redefine or define for the first time, perhaps, who you are as an individual.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's a really great opportunity. Is the podcast on all
platforms?
All platforms. Okay, great. Well, Perth, again, thank you, man. I appreciate it. This is a great story. I look forward to being on your podcast. At some point, once this is out, we'll talk. Maybe we can do a Q&A with the guys. Like I said, there's one gentleman who's really dealing with alienation, and I'm sure he would love to pick your brain. I would love to make you available to him, quite frankly, because I can't relate to that, not to that extent. So it would be great to do a Q&A as well. And I thank you for being willing and vulnerable and sharing your story. It's important, man, and it's what's needed, and more of it is needed. So again, I thank you very much.
It's an honor to be on the podcast. So it's a lot of fun to be able to share and spend time with guys.
Yeah, agreed. Amen. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And we will definitely do it again.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Thank you to Nick Coyle and Lifer for allowing me to use their song, Born Again, which you're hearing now and at the intro to the podcast. Thank you to Justin Dulahanty and all of my brothers at the Alpha Code. Please visit the website risingphoenixpodcast.com to connect with me and other like-minded men who are looking to thrive and grow after their divorce. And remember to surround yourself with people who add value to your life, who challenge you to be greater than you were yesterday, who sprinkle magic into your existence like you do to theirs. Life is not meant to be done alone. Find your tribe. Take care.